Hi guys, I'm Amy and this is my partner Maggie, and together we are Thinker Themer. Our review channel looks at games from two different perspectives. Firstly, from the mechanics, and secondly, from the theme. My lovely partner Maggie cares much more about the theme than I do. I'm all about being competitive and the way that theme really integrates with the mechanics. But today we're very excited to be talking to you about Tekhenu, which is the latest game from Board and Dice in the T series. And it's by two heavyweight designers, two of our favorites, Daniele Tascini and Dávid Turczi, both who make many of our favorite games. You can see some of them behind me. Trismegistus, Marco Polo, Tzolk'in, Teotihuacan, and Anachrony, David's game Anachrony. And they are all right up there in some of our favorite games. But anyway, back to Tekhenu. So Tekhenu has a unique mechanic, and it's all centered around the Obelisk. And I think I want to just start this. I'm very excited about this.
Yes.
Because I've painted the Obelisk and...
Great job.
Thanks, babe. But before we played, I insisted that it get painted. And the reason being is it's such an iconic part of this game. So
It's quite literally the central point of the game.
it is the central point of the game, and when people talk about it, they always mention the turning obelisk. When you see photos of it, it's always the obelisk. And it was just such a beige
Yeah.
plastic miniature kind of
plastic.
style, blah, plastic feature. And for something that's so essential to the game, I refused to play it until I painted it, and wouldn't let Maggie play it until we painted it either. And on the painting aspect, so during lockdown here in Melbourne, one of the things we never considered ourselves doing was painting miniatures. We're not, if you know our channel, we're not really into the fantasy theme that much. And so some of the characters and the tabletop gaming that it's associated with like the dudes on the map type gaming is less of our thing. And so we never thought we'd get into the painting, but actually the painting became a really integral part to the mindfulness that we found during COVID.
Yeah.
It's a way of just, the hours just disappear when you're focused on painting something, and it's such a nice way to, stop yourself from constantly reading the news and all of those other kind of detrimental.
So therapeutic.
Very
It's
therapeutic,
very
surprisingly
calming.
therapeutic. And because, we kind of go all in on hobbies, we started painting, and we started painting actually because of Anachrony. I wanted to paint the mech suits. Still haven't done it.
No.
Because
Still
I wanted
too
to.
scared.
Yeah,
Still
still
wanna
too
nail
scared
it.
because I wanted to work my way up to it. So we've been practicing, and then of course we brought Blood Rage and Rising Sun and went kind of miniature crazy. But anyway, that meant that we had the paints and the paintbrushes and everything to paint the obelisk, and we'll include the details of the colors and stuff in the comments in case, in the description, in case you're interested in the exact way that I did it. But I wanted to do...
You really nailed it, so I think it's worth,
I'm not sure
replicating,
a professional painter would say so, but I wanted to do it in a way that was really accessible. Basically, it's a coat of bronze, then a coat of gold, and then just doing the detail in dark black. And it makes a huge difference to the
really
aesthetics
stands
of the
out,
game. It
yeah.
stands out, and now I think it has the gravitas that it should have had. Like it should have had. That's like the main component of the game. Maybe that's what they intended, but I haven't seen a lot of people painting them. So I wanted to let people know, if I can do it, you can do it. I don't have an artistic bone in my body. And so, give it a go.
Yeah, it really makes you want to like excited about your turn, so you can go and turn it if you can turn it.
Yeah. Anyway, why don't you tell them a bit more about the theme?
So in Tekhenu, you are you're a noble in ancient Egypt. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to strike the perfect balance between keeping the many gods of ancient Egypt happy and in your favors, but also making sure that you are helping create a very in a materialistic sense or earthly sense, prosperous society, that you're helping the population increase and that you're helping with, the commerce be thriving, and that you're making sure that your people are also happy. No point in having a big population if they're going to be unhappy and have an uprise on your hands. So one of the things that I love about the theme of this game, is that everything, as we said, revolves around the obelisk. So a lot of the things that you're going to be doing is depending on where the sun is shining on the obelisk, there's going to be areas in the light, in the shadow, or in complete darkness. And the gods have different areas where they like to work or assist, or that is their domain. And so depending on where the light is shining, some activities or some tasks are going to be seen as pure, some are going to be tainted, and some are going to be forbidden. So that's where, you would be using those activities to help build the temple. And again, so you can praise the gods, you're going to be using it to build the real estate around the temple, which is more of an earthly pursuit, and then also to build the commerce or the area to produce goods and store goods. So that's in a very, nutshell, the theme of what it is. Let's go through the mechanics.
The mechanics, okay, not gonna lie, the mechanics are a bit overwhelming. When you look at this board, it is busy. It's so busy. And even when I had watched a playthrough, I'd read through the rulebook a couple of times, it's still really difficult to piece it together. But one of the core concepts to the game, and we won't take you through everything, obviously please don't ever use our reviews as a way of learning the rules.
This is not a how to play.
No, we'll leave that up to the experts. But the obelisk allows you to choose different die in different rounds depending on the way that the light is hitting them. And each die is a different color, and the color relates to a resource. And the number is essentially the power of that die. So you are constantly trading off the power of the die, the color of the resource that you can obtain by selecting that die, and the section where the die sits. So each of the 6 sections around the obelisk has a associated god action. So you can see that the gods are depicted around the outside in each one of these sections. When you take a die from the section, for example, if I take this 5 white, I can either use it to activate the god action, or I can use it to produce 5 of the white limestone resource. So you basically have those 2 options, to activate a god or to take it as a resource. But where it becomes more complicated is that the way that the light hits those die changes your ability to take them or not, and whether they are tainted or pure. So the die under a light condition, so that's what's shown here on this part of the obelisk, the white is pure, die that would be tainted would be yellow or grey, and then the black or brown die that have been randomly selected here are forbidden, and you aren't able to take them. And so when you take this die, this 5 white, for example, it's a pure die, and irrespective of whether you're using it to collect resources or you're using it to activate a god ability, when it goes onto your player board, it's going to go onto the pure side of your scales. And what I love about this game, the first thing is this amazing light, shade, dark concept. Hard to get your head around at first, but once you get the hang of it,
especially when you have the right side of the obelisk circle,
oh my goodness,
the guide showing.
There's around the obelisk, there's a little handy cheat sheet of which die are pure, tainted, or forbidden under that condition. We had the disc the other way up, which actually is more aesthetically pleasing, but doesn't have that guide on it. And we're like, oh, I wish the designers had done that. And I said that out loud. And then Maggie said, have you tried turning it over? And I was like, yeah, there's nothing on the, oh, okay, there it is. There's
It
the
is there. They thought about it and they put it in there.
Heads up, use the side that has the guide on it. Yeah. As I was saying, when you take a die and it goes into either the pure or the tainted side of your scales, you are ultimately trying to achieve balance between those two. And balance means the sum of the die that you have that are pure minus the sum of the die that you have that are tainted. And there are ways and abilities that help you balance that out. But at the end of each round, you're trying to, or what's called the Maat phase, you're trying to have the best balance, better than your opponents, because that means that you'll get to go first in turn order. And that interaction between which die are available, like which die and what they're classified as in terms of pure or tainted, and then what you need on your individual player board in order to maintain that balance becomes really difficult. I had a bit of analysis paralysis.
A fair bit. We both did, especially when you're first starting out, because there's a lot of layers to each area.
There are a lot of layers to the area. I haven't even gone into the areas, but just that simple interaction between your scales and the obelisk. I love that. That is such a great mechanic, because it's like the action I want to take means I want this die, but then if I take that, I'm going to be punished and be lower in turn order next round. And that trade-off is really interesting and fun. Like that's the kind of
it's a fun mini puzzle.
Fun for us. That's our way of classifying fun. Maybe not everyone's. And the way that the god actions work, so I've mentioned that you can take a die as long as it's tainted or pure, and that enables you to take the god action of that segment on this obelisk, one of the 6 segments. And then, relatively speaking, each of the gods face the area of the board that they activate. And so if we start in the top left-hand corner, this god allows you to build statues, and statues come off your player board, and you can see that they escalate in terms of victory points. So that part of the board allows you to build statues. This part of the board here allows you to, as Maggie mentioned, contribute to industry, and that's where you place buildings. So buildings are the other component that you have on your player board, and buildings, by putting them out into these spaces, they allow you to increase your production track. Your production track tells you how many of each resource you can produce before you have overflow that becomes a real problem in this game. Yeah. So for example, at the moment I can produce 2 parchment. And so with this parchment resource, if I go somewhere, if I use a die that would generate, for example, this yellow 4 would generate 4 pieces of parchment. The 4 pieces of parchment, I would only be able to keep 2 in my supply, and the other 2 would go into my tainted side of my scale.
Because you were greedy.
I was greedy and overproduced. And that, again, can put you out of balance, but isn't necessarily always a bad thing, because sometimes you might need to have a bit more weight on the tainted side. And so you might take that action simply to do that and have that overflow. But generally speaking, you want to be able to keep the resources, because you need resources to do a lot of different things in this game. You need to exchange them for other activities, for cards. And so you want to have as much as possible. So that's what happens here. Basically, there's a lot more going on here. There's so much going on, but I'm just going to touch on the different things you can achieve. By building buildings, obviously, the more that you can reveal, you can get victory points towards the end of the game. Another section is down here at the bottom. If you activate this god, and I wish I could remember all of the gods' names. I'm never going to remember all of the gods' names. It's just not going to happen. If I was to take this 2, for example, I could take a card for free from down the bottom. These cards become available as your population grows, and then as which is this large meeple, tracking your population. And then your happiness marker allows you to choose from that selection, and your happiness marker can never go past your population marker. So you've got to keep boosting your population in order to grow happiness, which makes thematic sense. And so, using this section allows you to take a card, and these cards come in 3 different forms. They come in faith cards. Blessings, thank you. Blessing cards, and they give you a one-off benefit that you can use at any point during the game. Then there are technology cards, so people who are familiar with Teotihuacan. I love that there's that synergy in that language, because the technology is a benefit that lasts you throughout the whole game, that allows you to break the rules of the game or gain some additional benefit. And then the third type
Decrees.
are decrees. And the decrees are endgame scoring conditions that can remain secret. And again, that is a nice synergy with some of their other games, which obviously can make a big difference at the end of the game. This section here is how you influence your level of happiness. This section up here allows you to build the same buildings from your player board around the edge of this, what I feel, this temple area is a mini game within the game. And this mini game, when you place a building, and you have to pay for that building, of course, when you pay that cost, you are allowed to grab one of each of the resources depicted in that same row or column. And what's interesting, in the next part or section of the obelisk, you can build pillars, and the pillars go within this space here. And when you build a pillar, you place it and you get points according to the number of buildings, whether they're yours or not, that are adjacent in terms of the row and column. And so if you put lots of buildings around the outside and you start building these pillars, you're going to accumulate a lot of victory points. But the other interesting thing is, if you start to build out pillars first, and then you put in a building, the building no longer gets the resources because they're covered up with the tile that you use to build the pillars. So it's a bit of an interesting, kind of dynamic about whether you build buildings first or pillars first. And it's also a bit of a race, because as more and more of those building spaces get covered up and the resources become unavailable, other players might benefit from that, whereas you're not. And the last part, or the section that allows you to build the pillars, you also choose a tile in order to place there. And then there are a massive amount of victory points that are available by where you place that tile, and whether the color around the outside of the tile matches up with the color of the tiles or the outside border surrounding it. And so it's a little puzzle within a broader game that is also very complex.
Yeah.
That puzzle, I think, would become even more important to the game as player count grows. Maggie and I, being in lockdown, have only played this as a 2-player game. But I've got to say, this has been one of my favorite games that we've played as in 2-player, because generally speaking, we tend to play with 3 or 4 players. I think most of the time we play with 3 or 4 players, different groups. And when lockdown first happened, I was pretty down about board gaming. I was a little bit like, I find it a very social thing that we do, and we don't often play games together. But this one gave me that same feeling that I get. It's not particularly tight in terms of you taking things that I wanted to do, but it is like a little edging ahead in terms of victory points. There's the point salad element of there are lots of different ways to get points in this game. And what I also love about this game is we purposely played this time and time and time and time again. And each time we went after different strategies. And I felt as though each of the strategies are impeccably balanced.
Yes.
I mean, you would expect that from these amazing designers, but I didn't expect it, because I was looking for the one thing that would overpower everything else. And I think there's a few things that you need to keep your eye on, whether people are building lots of statues, or this little building grid over here, which can contribute to a large sum of victory points at the end. But for the most part, you can focus on certain areas and still really be
fairly tight game at the end.
In terms of who's going to win it. And for that reason, I love this game. It hits all the right notes for me.
For me, from a theme integration point of view, the more I play with it and the more I think about it, even just listening to you talking about some of the components, additional areas clicked of that's right, and that also makes thematic sense. I love how you're in a world where you have all these ancient Egypt gods, And these gods are not all about you being good all the time. They're actually most pleased when you have the right balance of purity and, a little bit of tainted naughtiness, or a little bit of, greed. That is one of the hardest things. You're not going to be able to play this game and take a tainted dice without singing Tainted Love. At some point it will happen. It's inevitable.
Usually tainted die.
Yeah, yeah, it pains me from a dad joke point, but yeah, that's what happens. I love how the other thing that just clicked is in the area where you're building the temple, you are building the real estate essentially around it. And obviously, and that's the area where you actually can grow your population, because the more buildings you create, the more people can move into the area. The more people that you have in the area, the more people that you have in your area, then the more possible technologies and the more things you can do with them. But if they're too unhappy, you're not going to be able to engage them to, work with you or for you. If you're a noble, quite likely it's probably going to be a bit of a slave situation potentially, or maybe they're just, people just living their lives and working, workers. We'll just leave it at that. I also love how you can, for example, with the statues, that you have a choice of when you're building the statue, they cost resources, they cost graphite. And you can either build it for the gods or you can build it for the people. And so depending on whether you build it for the gods, you'll get an advantage whenever you use that domain of that particular god. So you get an additional resource or a bonus or a blessing from that.
Depending on player count.
Yeah, and but when you're building it for the people, you get advantages in an earthly sense. So when you're producing, either when you're building your real estate empire around the temple, which is the hot place where everybody wants to live, or if you're building your commerce, the ability to produce and store more goods. So again, I thought that theme integration is fantastic, and also just this concept of the light, the shadows, and the darkness, and how and I don't know much, if anything, about ancient Egypt religion or mythology, but this concept that for me, it's almost like you're around the market, and depending on the time of day, there's going to be things that are acceptable to do, activities or resources that are, acceptable to go after, and things that you just do not do, and things that you can do, but it's a bit frowned upon. And it's about striking that balance. One of the things that I wish, so from the immersing myself in the world and feeling like I'm a noble, helping build this thriving, prosperous society, and making sure that I keep in the good graces of the gods point of view, amazing integration. I love all of that. I do wish, it's such a theme-rich game that I wish that there had been more information about it in the rulebook, because I know that I imagine a lot of research went into this, and there's nothing in terms of who the gods are. I did my own research about who they were, and there isn't really that much of an integration of their area of domain in the game and what they were or what they are sort of seen to do, or what their actual kind of powers or responsibilities are. The only exception was the Maat phase. So the Maat phase, as Amy said, is you have these interim checks and balances points where it's one of your scoring checkpoints. And the Maat god is very much the one in charge of justice, balance, truth, and those sort of checks and balances. So that one aligned, but all the other ones were not really, all that integrated from that point. But all in all, really, really enjoyed this game. I love how any individual area is not just one component. It's not just I'm going to take some resources here. There's so many sub-puzzles within each area, and so many integrations of all the other spaces and all the other things that you can do, and so it can lead to a little bit of analysis paralysis.
But I think the other thing with this game is you have to be nimble, you have to be agile about changing your strategy, because there's an element of luck anytime you draw anything out of a bag. The dice get refilled, but only in the shady areas. And that's turning around with time using the Obelisk. And so you're not sure whether die are going to become available for the particular god that links into the strategy that you're trying to follow. And sometimes as we found out, all the die gets stripped out of one area and you can't any longer build a statue, and that was your whole game plan. And so you need to think about, okay, well, what's the next best bang for buck in terms of victory points? And, you know, doing those sums in your head is the part that gives you a bit of analysis paralysis, but it also is the part that makes this a fantastic game because there is constant tension between your scales that you're trying to balance, the dice that are available, what you think might be upcoming, what the other person's doing, and then taking die that you were going to take. So there's just so much going on that at first it's really overwhelming, but this is a game that rewards patience, that rewards, I think, getting to know the game better. Like, I wouldn't say stop after your first game.
Definitely not.
Try different things. It starts to all come together and make sense, and how these different sections interact, and what you need to do earlier in the game versus later in the game becomes really apparent the more you play it. And yeah, I love this game. I love that I got to paint the main element of the game.
And you nailed it. Let's be honest.
No, well, I mean, it looks infinitely better than what it did out of the box, but that's because
it looks amazing.
But it looked terrible out of the box. Like this big, anyway.
But also, as you said, like it's not an unachievable paint job to do. Like it's something that if you've never painted anything before, you can just get, and we will put in the description the actual paints that Amy used.
But yeah, I think that this game is one that we will continue playing over and over again. And
I want to play it now, just because it's let's
just
play
it.
But also, I can't wait to teach our friends when lockdown eases, because I just know the exact type of person that's going to want to play this, and it's, you know, a group of our more hardcore gamers, I would say.
That's good. Like, who would it be suitable for? Who would you recommend this?
Definitely not a gateway game. This is like, your eyes will glaze over if you are not interested in being patient to learn every part of the board and then to think about what you're going to do next. So definitely experienced gamers. I think most of the games by these designers are for experienced gamers, and this is definitely in line with that. I really recommend it at a 2-player count. I think that in terms of, I really loved and enjoyed playing it, and I think that it's closest if we talk about the T series, if we talk about their series, Teotihuacan is probably one of our favorite games in that series. Like, we play that a lot. We play it, generally speaking, with 4 players, and I feel as though this is a much better 2-player game than when we've played Teotihuacan as a 2-player game, because they have die that they place in certain areas that act as a third person, a bot kind of person.
That's right.
Yeah.
The filler dice.
But like, we played it a couple of times 2-player, and then from now on it's just when we have a bigger group. But this is one where I would be happy if we just continue to play it as a 2-player game. It's really, really great. And in terms of the other games, just to touch on them, Tzolk'in, I really, also by Daniele Tascini, I dislike this game.
I enjoy it. I quite like it. I don't mind it at all. Yeah.
I really dislike this game. I really dislike it. There's a lot of downtime.
That's true.
So the gears are fun, and I love worker placement, but this one just feels like painful to me. I think it's because there's a lot of waiting for your workers
to be patient. You're not very good at being patient.
I'm not really.
You're better now after lockdown, because you've learned a lot of that.
Maybe I'll like it more. We should play it again.
Like, this is great.
No, we're not going to play it again. No, actually, we have to keep it in our collection because our favorite gamers that we play with, it's one of their favorites. So unfortunately, I'm stuck playing that one.
And I don't mind, so I'm happy with it.
And the final, and actually, as much as I disliked Tzolk'in, I just really did not like Trismegistus. Trismegistus, again, Dávid worked on Trismegistus as well with Daniele. This one is too abstract. I find the idea of it too abstract, and the iconography so confusing. And we play complex games, and it got to the point where it wasn't worth it for me. The gameplay as a trade-off, it didn't feel fun. That's exactly it. It felt like hard work.
I'm still happy, like I'm in at an awkward position where I'm still happy to play it. Like I feel like I want to play it more times to give it a fair go and go, maybe there's something that I'm missing, but it didn't feel fun, which is different to this. Like this felt, even though you're really struggling, and it took us, 2.5 hours the first time that we were playing, because we kept stopping going, what? Like, get the rule book, what's happening? We got faster and faster. Like, now it probably takes us
an hour?
Less. Like, I think it was like 45 minutes to 50 minutes.
A game, and it's really satisfying.
But even at the start, it was still like, it was fun. Even when
the problem that I have with Trismegistus in particular is that when I finish it, I don't want to immediately start again with a different strategy. Whereas I'm just like, oh, I know we're getting closer. Or can I try something different? And that feeling is what I love.
I'm going to say it's because maybe the theme is too abstract in Trismegistus. Even though I understand it, it's a little bit, whereas this
but the symbology. Anyway. Yeah. Anyway, that's kind of our internal ranking of the T's, T game. So this would be a close second to Teotihuacan.
I think it's taken over for me. And I think that's probably because I love Teotihuacan, but I never win at it. Like I won initially when we first started playing, then the more we played, I don't know what happened. But either I just got worse and worse, or everybody else got better and better around me. Whereas with this one, and I feel like now I know what to expect with Teotihuacan, we haven't really played a lot of the
ascending die. But the ascending die, where they turn to a 6, so you just get to go,
concept.
Every time.
Without fail.
Every time.
There's a
as common as Tainted Die song.
So, Tainted Die, So, but I feel like with this one, I'm enjoying way more the, let me try, and I'm very much, I get in my head that I want to try a strategy, and I'll try and stick with it. And we learned the hard way that sometimes that doesn't pay off, because if there's no die in your area, you're going to be really stuck. There are some ways around it, but it's not ideal. But I'm just finding that I'm enjoying this. It feels like there's more variety and replayability than there is with Teotihuacan. So for me, this is actually would rank as number 1.
Wow.
And Teo is still like a close second. Like I still love that game. Yeah.
Well, and I should mention, like Anachrony is probably another, heavier favorite game.
Very different though.
By Dávid, and it is a brilliant game. I prefer this. Yeah. And that's just because I feel like there's probably more choices, and it just suits our style a bit more. But I do, love a lot of these games and what they bring, and these designers, the way that they bring new mechanics and they create such well-balanced, perfect designs. Whether you love or hate each of these individual games, you can't help but be so in awe of what they really do for the hobby, and for that reason I will continue to buy every single game that they put out. So that's Tekhenu. We love it. We're going to keep playing it, and
as I found out, it's not tequeño, which is actually a Venezuelan delicious finger food. And I kept going, tequeño? That sounds amazing. We're going to play tequeño. It's essentially a delicious deep fried cheese stick. If you are anywhere near a Venezuelan, mention a tequeño, and they will lose their mind.
Maybe we should ask the designers if they could do like a tequeño. A tequeño obelisk, a cheese stick.
Yes. Yes, anyways, it's not tequeño, it's a tequeño, as I found out. So less excited, but still an amazing
game. Yeah, it's all right, less delicious. Thanks for tuning in. If you like this video, we'd love if you could help us out and hit the like button down below, or subscribe to our channel. We've got more reviews coming up, and we can't wait to share them with you. Thanks, and bye for now.
Bye.